I want you to hear me clearly when I tell you that conclusion number 4 in the state of North Carolina's public health cancer screening, it states the Rice family, the Robinson family, could have had their health impacted by up to 11 years of exposure to trichloroethylene in the water that they drank and in the air that they breathed. If you just take this, because if you take this information and understand that in 1999, when we get to that slide, once they test the springs properly and they realize that it's 7,000 times over the maximum, once they're removed from their spring water, this is the date that they say from this point backward, that's the point of exposure. And the state of North Carolina says up to 11 years of exposure. Well, this shaves off 9.5 of those years. What's the impact if they hadn't drank the water for 9.5 more years? There it is. Want another example? How about this aerial? You think that aerials like this aren't available to organizations like the EPA, that they couldn't have looked at an aerial when they looked at CASD-02, which was taken right here, that they couldn't go, are people living in that house? Because there are cars right here. Maybe we should check their water source. And after all, it's only 200 feet from the plant. And keep in mind, right here in 2001, 32 to 34 feet deep, they're going to learn that there's almost 1 million parts per billion of TCE in the soil. This is a disaster that did not need to happen, and they have covered it. Now the question would be, how do they cover it? We need to talk a little bit further about the history of the 1990s. Because of what they found at the lagoon and the convergence of those two streams, one location on the plant property and the Rice property, the state of North Carolina's John Walsh, NCDENR, said that the site required further investigation. They simply handed the state toxicologist the report. Dr. Asafa scored the property. It became a state Superfund site, it being CTS of Asheville. It was already on the EPA's Superfund list. What Dr. Asafa referenced was cadmium, silver, vanadium, barium, zinc, but more importantly, those are bad, but more importantly, the benzenes, the vinyl chloride, the trichloroethylene, the dichloroethylene, the copper, the nickel. They don't put the chromium on here, and they don't put the cyanide. Cyanide in the water. A couple of key questions. Why weren't the Rices informed in 1990? They were exposed for over 9 more years to toxic waste products from the CTS of Asheville Superfund site. And as a result of not investigating the Rice water source, the Robinsons were subjected to the same health implications because they were across the street on a well. There is CASD-02. It was 1,100 parts per billion. That was 79 times higher than the background sample. They didn't want us to find that. I think they were desperate that no one would see that and no one would notice it. Now I want to tell you something. I'll tell you a quick story. After we had a meeting with Senator Burr by way of John Mitchell, and Congressman Schuler was there, and Representative Wilden was there, and Senator Hagan was there being represented. The new on-scene coordinator, Stephen Ball, when we were asking him about putting a sign up on the property to reflect that it was a Superfund site, said he didn't know if that was part of his job description. I saw him one morning putting the sign up. We talked briefly, and I said, you know, Stephen, it would be a great idea if you and I could sit down and have some coffee. We could show you what we've learned and give you our perspective. Stephen interrupted me and said, I'm going to tell you one thing, I'm going to back my colleagues. I said, what? He said, I'm going to back my colleagues. I said, what if they're wrong? He didn't say anything. So I said, you'd walk the plank for other people and never even ask why? Well, I think that we're indebted to Stephen Ball, because when I found out that an on-scene coordinator, in the face of all this information, would be pushing us to accept the state's voluntary remediation deal with CTS that would limit their exposure to $5 million, when the state is bankrupt, basically, doesn't have the money to do the cleanup, and he's saying that we could get some cleanup. And I asked him if he'd even read the document that he was asking us to support, and he said no. I told him the next time he buys a piece of property, don't read the contract, just sign it. That's the logic you're using. But when he said he would back his colleagues, that's when we knew that we were on to something. Here's the letter from John Walsh, environmental engineer, inactive hazardous sites branch. That means Superfund sites. He said that because this site had so many bad contaminants at the levels, 18 constituents in 3 different media, he said it needed further investigation, and Dr. Asafo obliged and scored it a Superfund site. John Walsh in 2007 said the property was subdivided and we were not aware of it. He was aware of it. He was the one that mandated that they record their deed to reflect the hazardous constituents on it in 1997, 1998. The problem for John is he conveniently forgot all the things that he referenced in this document, and I believe he conveniently forgot that he had filed this, his own memo to Charlotte Jesnick, the head of Superfunds for North Carolina. The state of North Carolina will go on to send 12 years worth of letters to the Mills Gap Road Associates guys who had bought the property in 1987 for $440,000 plus $100,000. In addition to that, $5,000 was an immediate escrow payment. $95,000 would be a balloon payment to be paid off in 1997. This is where it gets interesting on a local level. It's already interesting because Denise Ballou and the folks at Public Health for the county didn't bother to go over and check the Rice's water source. They would have, that in and of itself would have eliminated all 11 years that are referenced in the state of North Carolina's public health cancer screening. I'd say they have a bit of a liability issue on that. This letter right here is a response from the state toxicologist to the Mills Gap Road Associates boys, Greenberg, Powell, and Schlossman. It is telling them that they will not be removed from the state inventory of Superfund sites. The number one reason: concentrations of 1 to 2 dichloroethylene in sediment N, Ca, Sd, O2 exceed the levels that are believed to pose health risks. That's the Rice property that they're referencing. Oops. That's the contaminant that got off of the plant site and now is on the Rice property, making them sick, and this is in 1995. And those folks are going to drink the water for 5 more years, even though she is telling the owners of the property, the number one reason you may not receive a no further action status letter is because of the risk that that one particular sample contained. And no one came out to the Rices to check where they lived, the proximity to that sample, what their water source was. But it gets better than that.